We're back.
Hi,
Mary Margaret.
Sarah.
And we are here to talk to you a little bit about a page that's kind of underutilized. And I'm going to let Sarah describe that, and then we'll let the discussion go from there.
All right, thank you, Mary Margaret. So what we're going to talk about is a scoring summary sheet. It is depending on the manual, but if you are in the pre-K manual, it's on page 18. And if you look in your handy-dandy score sheets, it's in the back. And the scoring summary sheet is actually really, as Mary Margaret said, it's really overlooked, it's underutilized, and there's just a rich body of information that you can get when you're looking at the score sheet.
Right. So a lot of times when we're looking at a single cycle for testing or in a training situation, we lose sight of the value of doing 4 to 6 cycles in a classroom over time. And that's what gives us a true snapshot of what's going on in the classroom. And so I like to look at this, it's figure 2.2, as Sarah was saying. And what that represents is, can I see that? It is a filled out score sheet from each one of the cycles that you do. And at the end, you input those scores into this grid, and there's a lot of information within this grid. And so that's what we're going to talk about, and what can you do with that information, and how can you use that for coaching or professional development. So one of the things you'll notice is that it's got a place for the time of the cycle, how many people were there, so the ratio, and then what was going on in the classroom. And there's a lot of variation in that. So for whatever reason that you're preparing or looking at the data, you need to have a clear definition for what is a small group or what is a whole group, etc. So that would be very dependent on your own particular use of that, and that people use it consistently. But the other thing that's interesting is if you take a look across each one of the cycles at the dimension level, you're going to see some variation.
Right.
And those are good places to ask questions about why is there variation?
Right.
Where did it change? Was it ratio? Was it activity?
Was it large or small group?
Was it science? Was it art? Was it social studies? Center time? And those are great times to ask a teacher what was going on in that classroom. Not like you are a bad teacher or a good teacher because your score was this or that, but what's happening at whole group time that is making it less possible for you to have conversation with your children. Right. So those kind of questions that are not putting the teacher on the spot, but really asking that teacher to give some insight and reflect on what's going on.
Yeah. And sometimes you really can see a clear pattern that a teacher may have much more sensitivity in small groups and may have better instructional learning formats and may have a lot more conversations during small groups just because there is that smaller ratio. But sometimes you really can't tell, and so that's the time to look across the data and say, wow, I see a spread of scores from 1 to 4. What was going on during this first cycle? Let's talk about it. How were you feeling when you taught that activity?
Or you might, and if you have your score sheets, you can say, I noticed that during center play when you were in the dramatic play area with your kids playing dress up, there was a lot of laughter and everybody was really connecting, and then you were asking all these open-ended questions that were really pulling the children in, and that was so great because we know that really helps us with their getting their point of view, so we can ask those more open-ended questions around concept development or give them more feedback and quality of feedback. So it's all really linked in there.
Yeah, and as you're saying this, I'm realizing that what Mary Margaret's example is definitely a better one to start with than to say, why did you have this one? Talking about the areas where you're seeing that strength first.
So, talking more about the difference is not really the score in itself, but really like why is there a variation?
Absolutely.
And then the other thing that you can get from this summary sheet is the where you'll see over here on this side, you've got the domain level scores. And the domain level scores are averaged with all of the dimensions, but then they're also giving you the average by dimension. So you've got the domain and the dimension. And that can give you a lot of information as well, especially if you're going to try to improve scores in a particular area. You could look at a place where there's strength, or you could look at a place that maybe was the lower of the dimensions, and that's something that I personally like to have the teacher drive. But for instance, if you're in the pre-K manual and you're looking at page 18, Sarah and I were looking earlier when we were discussing what we would say today, that ILF is at a 5.5, and it's sort of in the mid-range for that classroom organization domain overall score. Mm-hmm. So that might be a place to look, and then look at the variation there and see if the teacher had some ideas about how she could or he could further engage the children to focus their interest, and thereby that would really drive instructional support and really emotional support as well. So it's just something to think about when you're gathering all your data. If you're a coach or a mentor, if I was a director still, I would get so much out of this. It's really giving us antecedents. Yeah. And it might even tell me that, I need to have a teacher come in a half hour earlier, or there needs to be an assistant if we've got a child that's got particular special needs that needs extra help transitioning to the bathroom or something. I can see where that's, that negative climate score, behavior management score might be affected by that. So it gives us hard data to tell where we could make some possible improvements. Right. And the really cool thing with my geek on is that you can go in and provide professional development and go back and see if you actually made changes.
Yeah, and I agree. We both have our geekness about the class. But the other thing I'm thinking about is, it is great to have, the teacher drive the focus of the PD, because that means the teacher is going to be much more invested. Mm-hmm. But sometimes it is better to select where there are things going on and where it would be fairly easy to help that teacher improve the interactions in the classroom. Whereas if we're starting at some place where there's really nothing going on, then that's going to be really hard.
Sure.
So starting with the success areas.
With quality of feedback?
Sure.
No, giving them quality of feedback.
I know what you meant.
So that's our blog for today. If you would let us know stuff you'd like to know more about, these conversations happen all the time, and we just like to record them. But if there's anything you want to know, please just put it in the comment box, and we'll try to do that.
All right. Thanks. Bye.